Hi, I'm BJ, and this is the Arcane Alienist Podcast. Hi everybody, hope you're doing well out there. It's here. This is the 1-year anniversary, 100th episode of the Arcane Alienist. Thanks to everybody who has listened along with me so far, and I hope you keep on listening. What I've got today, I've got a discussion that I talked about on the last episode about making pre-published adventures your own, making the game your own when you run a role-playing game. There'll be a recap of my last session of our campaign in the Mythic World of Urd, my homebrew setting, kind of embedded in that. So that's in there as well, just to bring everybody up to speed on where we are with that campaign. And then I've got a lot of calls from some of the other members of the Anchor podcasting community. And that's what's on tap for this episode. So let's dive into it. So for this 100th episode / 1-year anniversary, I want to talk a little bit about making it your own and kind of what I've done, particularly over the last year. Over more than the last year of gaming, particularly in the last year, and talk a little bit about the concept of when you are a game master. And we talk a lot about rules, and you can always amend the rules. You can add house rules. You can take away some of the standard rules if you don't like them or your group doesn't like them. So there's always that discussion of making the rules your own. When we talk about making the game your own, I think most people think of ruling, how the DM or the game master rules, and how they make use of the rules to for whatever works for them and their players, right? We recently decided to make a change to our old school essentials campaign. It was the players actually requested it, and I'll talk a little bit about. Well, I'll go ahead and talk about that now. We'll get that out of the way, and then we'll talk about my larger point, which is making the story, or at least the narrative or the events of the world, your own. We'll circle back around to that. But it was kind of interesting in my last old school essentials session. My players do not like group initiative. I don't think it's so much the group initiative as it is the BX, missile movement, magic, melee sequence. It's just not working for us. I think if we were sitting at a table with miniatures all together in the same room, it might go a little smoother, but it's just not translating well to the way we play online. And I could analyze it to death and never come up with the correct answer as to why that is. And they just kind of say, they were just kind of a general frustration with it, and then a couple of players said, "Hey man, can we use an individual initiative?" So yeah, sure. So we tried the last bit of the final encounter of the night with individual initiative, and I think everybody liked it. So we are going to do that. I had to sit and think about afterwards. We just kind of winged it. It kind of went back and went through the kind of in my head. Had to play through a few scenarios of how will individual initiatives look within the old school essentials or the BX rule set. But we're still mostly sticking with the rules. It's just the individual initiative version of the rules. But the other thing they asked about doing was just go into negative hit points. I do have a house rule where when you drop to 0, up to this point anyway, you drop to 0 hit points, you're not dead. Your companions have 1 round to save you. So you fall dead, and the next round if somebody can get to you and administer a healing potion or do something to revive you, that's you can survive. But what happens is, lo and behold, most of the time when people drop to 0, they're not standing within arm's reach of a cleric, and you can't move and cast a spell on the same turn or in the same round. And so people have to scoop somebody up and drag them over to the cleric if they want to get that done. I didn't anticipate that implication of that rule of just you got a round to save them. Not thinking about the clerics not being able to move when I decided to try using that rule. And so we decided to do a kind of AD&D style negative hit point rule, which basically gives the cleric time to move and a reasonable chance of saving somebody, stabilizing somebody and saving them, even if it takes them 2 rounds to do it, because the movement rule, the person's going to be bleeding out for a few rounds. So it does give them a chance to save their companions, but it's not guaranteed. Monsters can always get in the way. You can take some massive damage. So it is a little more the AD&D style, ways to have a little more that one shot at surviving after you've been dropped to less than 0 hit points. So we're gonna roll with that, and then the individual version of Old School Essentials initiative, and I think we're going to be fine. So there's one way of sort of looking at the rules, and between an optional rule for Old School Essentials and importing a rule from AD&D. I think we'll that's kind of what the party wanted, and I'm cool with that. So, because they kind of got beat up pretty bad in the last fight. I'll have a recap of that here in a little bit. But as to making the part of the game that isn't the rules your own, and here I'm talking about published modules and published settings. Of course, my Old School Essentials game is homebrew. The setting, the Mythic World of Urd. And some of you guys who listen regularly may have already parsed this out, but the campaign I've been running is Keep on the Borderlands. I think only one of my players picked up on that, which is funny because I think I've got 7 of them, and I know 4 of them have played Keep on the Borderlands at some point in the past. A couple of them in games with me. So, but what I did is I've tried to change enough of it that it's not just immediately recognizable as Keep on the Borderlands. I'm using the map for the Caves of Chaos, but what I did is I spread the locations out so that they're not all within, a few yards of each other. Instead of having, these different factions of monsters kind of grouped in separate caves because they have trouble getting along, but they're all kind of part of a larger group, I kind of spread them around. So you have the Goblinoid group, which is goblins, hobgoblins, and bugbears. You have the kobolds, and then the orcs. I changed them as you might remember, they're not actually orcs. They're a group of human bandits who are trying to make it look like orcs are the ones who are doing the raiding on the highway there. And so by spreading the locations of the caves out, so they have to seek them out and go traipse through the woods and try to find them and go back and forth and look for clues. It's not just show up at the little canyon, or crater there where the caves are, pick a cave. You kind of have to go around and find the caves and learn about the existence of one from something you discover in the other. And so it draws it out a little more like a more contemporary campaign. And it gave me a chance to really think about the motivations. Because when I decided I wanted to do Keep on the Borderlands, I was kind of inspired by Dan Masters, who's better known as Professor DM, who does the Dungeon Craft YouTube channel, where he talked about adapting Keep on the Borderlands to his kind of grimdark world that's probably more like Warhammer Fantasy. So I thought, well, I could do that. I could make some changes to, not just his changes, but try to think about my own and still kind of play somewhat true to the setup. And I found that just by spreading out the caves so that they're all right together, now you've got, instead of they're a little more disconnected, and you can kind of have an individual story. And then I had to think about, okay, well, then why are all these monsters here? And in my head, starting to come up with the idea, okay, well, in the Mythic World of Urd, goblins are kind of dark, fey descended creatures from the other world, and they all worship and respond to this archfey called the Troll King, and people can bargain with the Troll King, and then you get goblin mercenaries to come in, and that's why, that's why they're readily available to evil archvillains all over the Mythic World of Urd, because you make a pact with the Troll King, and he sends you a force of goblins and hobgoblins and bugbears as needed for whatever you want them to do. I thought, well, so the goblins are going to be manufacturing gunpowder in the woods. Okay. What do I do with these orcs? And I come up with the idea, okay, well, we kind of didn't want orcs to be a traditionally adversarial group in this setting. So let's have humans, and that's where I came up with the idea for the orcs wearing masks as a cultural thing, is it was just a way I could cleverly disguise humans as orcs, give them an easy way to do it if they're going to be raiding merchant caravans. Keep your distance and shoot bows. And I thought, well, how are they going to get up on close to them? Well, let's give them some ghouls. The ghouls can actually be orc bodies that have been turned into ghouls, and reinforce that these are really orcs for people. So there's the orcs. The kobolds, they could have fought the kobolds, but they walked in and got a good reaction roll and negotiated with the kobolds, and suddenly these kobolds who had been pressed to mine sulfur, in what is traditionally the kobold lair is now a sulfur mine. The kobolds become a non-hostile faction, and they're like, oh, well, these guys can help us. So, and they wind up with a kobold sidekick eventually. So now they're zeroing in. They're in the last phases of the campaign, and most of that's been revealed. So there's no spoilers there for that. But I was just thinking of why are all these people here other than just, well, they're evil and they're just there? Because keep on the Borderlands, you've always had the ability to make your own plot, but I think a lot of the assumption is this is a starting adventure. There's a whole bunch of caves full of monsters who have been stealing from and raiding and stuff, and so, hey, go kill the monsters and take the loot, right? Well, I wanted a little bit different type of story, and I hate to use the word story because the players are making the story. I wanted to set that kind of like I was talking about with Westworld. I want to create this setting and know what's going to happen and what's going on in the background, so the players can take their characters and engage with these different pieces as they see fit. They can follow the leads they want, the clues they want. They don't have to go in any particular order. So they've lost a couple of party members along the way for biting off more than they can chew, or not paying attention to their tactics. And we nearly averted that in this last campaign. So what happened was, the last time they had gone back to talk to the kobolds who had moved out of the mines, and so the dwarves could go back to their mine. They'd gone into the goblin caves that had been cleared out. So they decided to go back to the kobolds and say, hey, can any of you remember where it is you came up to the surface world nearby here? Because Hagel, their retainer in the party, can't remember where it is. So they go to they go to the caves, which were the goblin caves. Now the kobolds are gone, and they've got all these. They can see all these tracks where the kobolds kind of ran away off into the woods. So they find some bugbears ambush them as they go into the cave to see what's going on. I think I may have recapped this one already, but anyway, they defeat the bugbears and then they question the last one, who breaks, his morale breaks and he surrenders, so that they question him, and he, they've been taking all the gunpowder up to their separate lair that the bugbears have from the other goblinoids. They're the only goblins left, but the Troll King has sent a troll to oversee them and make sure that they finish their end of their obligation. So now they got to figure out, and that's one of the two things they've been tasked to do by the Castellan, is to what happened to all that gunpowder that the goblins were obviously making, and then can you get these kobolds back home with their queen? This cult that seems to be behind the whole thing has kidnapped the kobold's queen. That's how they first pressed him into service in the mine. So they find a location. They're going to go talk to the bugbears first, instead of trying to find the kobolds. So they come up. There's some caves where the bugbear kind of said that this is where our lair is, but there's kind of an open cave kind of right there when they come into the clearing, and there's two other caves. One of them which has been some stones have been piled around it, and there's a crude door fixed to it. Well, they decided to check out the lower cave first before going up to the one with the door. They get in there, and the cave forks to the right and left. Most of the party goes to the right. Three of them go to the left. So you've got Celestina, who is a magic user, her retainer Dominique, who's kind of like a fighter, and her bodyguard, who we've kind of patterned on Brienne of Tarth, and Jessup, who's a thief. They kind of go to the left, and Hagel the kobold scouts to the right and says, "Hey, there's a pool of water in here." And so he calls back, and as the others go to meet him, a gray ooze drops from the ceiling and attacks him. So all but those other three party members are immediately kind of going in there as this is unfolding and get involved in this fight with some, another one drops off the ceiling, one kind of rolls up out of this pool of water. So they're fighting with the gray oozes, and Hagel doesn't have many. He's a retainer. Eats through his armor, and he drops to 0 hit points. They manage to save him. Then another one kind of gets Hedemar, who's the lead cleric of the group, and destroys his armor. And he barely gets away with. I think he actually goes down at one point, and they have to save him. So they manage to defeat these gray oozes, but eventually it's with a lot of ranged attacks. So finally, one of the fighters fires off a pistol. Or maybe it was either a pistol or an arquebus, and you hear the gunpowder. So I've got these other three party members who have branched off to the left, and they're walking around. And they're noticing that they're stepping on these big piles of bones, and some rats scurry. They hear some scurrying of giant rats, and one of them comes out into the torchlight and kind of sniffs, and it rolled a neutral reaction, so it just kind of sniffed them. But then from behind him, here comes this sound of gunpowder going off. So they go, well, man, maybe we should go back and see what that is. So they turn around and they head back, and just as they get, about halfway to where they're going, there's this huge roar from behind them, and an owlbear charges out, and he manages to, he takes down Jessup the thief, and they are able to, if we didn't have three clerics in the group, we'd be in trouble because it always leaves some. They can spread out, and because we've got two clerics, and then one of the retainers is a cleric. So they did manage to fend off the owlbear. Celestina, the magic user, used her. She has a wand of paralyzation. Used it on the owlbear. She caught Roderick, one of the clerics, and Harold, who's a fighter, in the crossfire. But it paralyzed the owlbear, but they got caught in the crossfire, and the rest of the party were able to basically put the owlbear down and then prop Harold and Roderick up against the wall till the spell wore off. And they decided, what, we're beat up, we're out of healing spells. Two of us have lost our armor. Well, it's time to go back to town, buy some new armor, heal up completely, and then we'll come back and try to find which cave the bugbears are actually in. So a lot more things they can discover in the woods. They follow the breadcrumbs, and again, they go in what order they go based on the information they discover. So it's still kind of sandboxing, and there's still a lot to go here. So I don't think I've spoiled anything for any of them. That now I asked them the other night, hey, how many of you guys know that we've been doing Keep on the Borderlands? So I think we're good even for the people who've played through it before. But that was an example of making a pre-existing module my own. I've done the same thing with Storm King's Thunder as well, my 5th edition game. I've generally followed the adventure the way it went, but without spoiling too much for everybody, the villain's motivations never made good sense to me. Just wasn't satisfying, so I changed them up a little bit, which caused me to bring the Cult of the Dragon in more prominently in the modules than they feature. And this is this building tension between dragons and giants. And because in the book, in the as published, the ordning between giants has been shattered by Anam, the god of giants, because he's dissatisfied with his giants being kind of passive in the world. I could see doing that. I mean, I can see that would be the effect of undoing the ordning, but it doesn't really give much. He just wishes the giants were more prominent, but then if you succeed, you kind of fix that problem, and the giants go back to the status quo, and for some reason their god is just going to be happy with that. I don't know, because it's just these. It didn't make any sense, so I redid it as lean more into the conflict between dragons and giants. Instead of making Iymrith an opportunist, I made her more the as far as we know now, for now, is the mastermind behind everything that's been screwing with the party, and that they've kind of uncovered this plot. So we're probably just 3 or 4 sessions away from finishing Storm King's Thunder. But I did change several plot points, and I won't go into all the details to sort of narrow the scope of it so that it was enough for people to take in, and to when they made their characters initially, tried to put in things that would work well with their background. I didn't have to make very much up. I just had to, kind of nudge them in certain directions. There was a big sandbox portion in the middle of the campaign, and just kind of planting the clues, and then give them a little nudge here and there, with a carrot to kind of get them into the aspects of the module I was interested in running without forcing them to it. Still allow them the flexibility that they're driving, and it's still a story that's emerging based on their choices. And so, finally, my next, I think Temple of Elemental Evil, I'm going to run that next. Again, well-known pre-published module. As I started reading it, I'm reading it going, this plot doesn't make much sense. I mean, it makes sense, but kind of like with Keep on the Borderlands, you've got enough where you got to connect some of the dots yourself, I feel like. And so I'm like, well, what's the motivation and the personality? You get these, you get these evil factions that you can either fight head on, you can try to sow some division and pit people against each other. How does that work? So I have to make a list of all the, okay, here are the bad guys, and here's the mini bosses and the big bosses and the arch villain, and why are they all here? Because the default original Temple of Elemental Evil, it's a great mega dungeon. It's not a huge mega dungeon. Some people though I've referred to it as maybe the first sort of mega dungeon that was published. Of course, it's not nearly as big as Undermountain, but it is a big dungeon with different groups and different factions, and some ability to come and go if you're careful. But yeah, the plot is just a little nebulous for me. It's just, I don't say it's nebulous. It's understandable. It's just not satisfactory. I got to have a better. Again, I've got to think, what's going to happen? What are these guys doing? What are they working for? If the heroes don't intervene, or if the characters don't intervene, what's going to happen next? And I've got to think about that in terms of the NPCs and the people in Hamlet and the can't think of the other town that's up near the temple. The monsters in the temple. Where is this all going? And so I've got to sit and I did this with Storm King's Thunder, and I did this with Keep on the Borderlands. I got to sit and just sort of, I open up a Word document and just sort of start with a bullet list of all the the NPCs or factions or sometimes locations, and I just start trying to thread. Here's what's going to happen in my version of the Temple of Elemental Evil. Here's what's going to happen in my version of the Caves of Chaos. Here's what's going to happen in my version of Storm King's Thunder. And so again, for a long time, I wouldn't do that. I wanted to run if I was running a published module, I wanted to run it as written, because I had this notion, particularly when you do something like Keep on the Borderlands or Temple of Elemental Evil or Saltmarsh or something like that, that's a classic. It's a touchstone, or it's a touch point where you can talk to a D&D player that you've never played with before about their experiences in some of these well-played, well-established classic modules. And so I didn't want to make stuff up and deviate, because I wanted my players to be able to have be able to share that experience with someone else. Maybe I was a little rigid. Again, it's not like I was doing this yesterday, but I used to do that. And so I've had to come to learn to let's rewrite the module as needed a little bit, so that it makes sense in my head what's going to happen, so that I know how things are going to react at the table in the moment without having to look about it, think things up. I've already thought about this NPC and their motivation and fit them into, kind of a background, dynamic background that is taking place as the characters kind of pick and choose where they interact with it, and then I'll know how the world responds, when the players act. So anyway, those are my thoughts on making it your own. It's been a great, had a lot of fun doing it this past year, and I plan to keep on doing it for as long as I can. I guess they'll prime my D20 from my cold dead hands, at some point, someday. But yeah, so that's making it your own. So let's start off with a call from Joe Richter of the Hindsightless podcast, who's going to pretty much echo a lot of the stuff I just said in terms of some of the same sentiments. So about making prewritten modules your own story, your own thing. So take it away, Joe.
Hey, BJ, I'm really excited about your 100th episode, and you mentioned that a big topic for that episode was going to be you talking about taking a pre-written adventure and making it your own. And it's a pretty interesting topic, because right now I am in the process of running one of Paizo's big, huge adventure paths, and I almost exclusively before now ran homebrew sandbox adventure. So it is quite the change of pace for me. And I'm having a lot of fun with it, but it's definitely, for me, it was always, the reason I didn't really run pre-written adventures is because I always thought they were more work. And it's proven to be, for me in my position with my abilities and limitations, pre-written adventures are a lot more work than coming up with stuff on the fly on my own and just, playing the puppet master. But now I'm running this big, huge adventure, which takes players not only from 1st through 20th level. It was the first adventure from Paizo that went all the way up to 20. It also gives players this whole other leveling system that comes into the game later. So yeah, it's massive. And this first part of the adventure is on rails, kind of. And I've said it before, all pre-written adventures, by their very nature, are sort of on rails. And it does come down to what you do with those rails, where you put in the twists and the turns and the loop-de-loops and stuff to make it your own. And that's what I did with the opening ceremony. I think you probably heard Jason talk about it on Nerds RPG Variety Cast. And yeah, it's all about taking that adventure, building from the seeds, and just really running with it. A lot of it, though, comes down to having amazing players that are there to go on that ride. And I'm lucky enough to have an amazing group, and we're having a blast so far, even though we've only played the one session. But yeah, like I'm taking every little opportunity I can to make this my own and make the campaign come alive and make it different than, Johnny Numbnuts running Wrath of the Righteous. I want my Wrath of the Righteous to be different than, Sophia's Wrath of the Righteous. So, yeah, it's really important to make it your own. Congratulations on 100 episodes. Congratulations on making it a whole year. That's amazing, BJ. You keep putting out awesome content. I'll keep listening. Until next time, peace out.
Thank you for the call, Joe. I think we're on the same page on that. Yeah, I can imagine. I can only imagine the extra difficulty of of trying to run a pre-written adventure when you have a visual impairment that credit to you for doing that, man, for putting in the time and the effort for the love of the game. But yeah, I think you're echoing a lot of what I said in that previous segment about making it your own. Thanks for thank you for the shout out for this being my 100th episode. Always glad to hear your voice. Take care, and I'll talk to you later. And I would add as an afterthought, just based on what Joe was talking about, it would be great to get to the point where I could run a pre-published adventure by reading it, internalizing kind of the plot and the stuff that's going to happen, making the changes that I want, and then just being able to run it off the top of my head as though I had written it myself. To have that level of flexibility of what's essential and not essential, and kind of a plan going in, but a flexible enough plan that you can always respond to what the players do. I don't know if I'll ever get there. It gets easier every time, but I don't know if I'll ever quite get there. Okay, next up we've got calls from Collin Green of the Spike Pick podcast, another great Anchor podcaster. And Collin is going to take me to task for bringing up the concept of story game and how it's defined. And I agree with what he's about to say. We just need to blame Karl Rodriguez, and we'll get to Karl a little bit later in the show. But for now, here's Collin.
Oh no, BJ, why did you have to go there? You had to go there, didn't you? I'm going to blame Karl Rodriguez. It's his fault, really. Story game? What is a story game? Come on, you two gentlemen should know better than that by now. Seriously, that's like going into a guitar shop and playing Stairway to Heaven. Oh, man. You might as well have asked, what is the OSR? And it was such a good episode up to that point. I don't know. Maybe you didn't get the memo. Take care, mate. Catch you later. But being as you've started it, BJ, I'm obliged to now inflict my opinion upon you. And it's going to take, I'd imagine, a good 6 to 8 messages. So you better strap in, make yourself comfortable. All right, so I shall begin. Firstly, no, I'm only joking, mate, only joking. But I think what you're talking about is called fronts in Dungeon World. And the other guy who talks a lot about it is the lazy dungeon master, just keeping that story ticking over in the background. I always do it. I never really thought much about it. And yeah, I wouldn't codify it, and I'm certainly not going to start gnashing my teeth or pulling my hair or anything like that. And you know what? It always cracks me up, that nervous laugh thing you do. Oh, it's awesome. Take care, mate. Catch you later.
Hey, Collin. Glad you appreciate my nervous laugh. Now I'm trying to suppress it as I respond to your message, and I don't know. I don't know if I can do it. Oh man. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out about Dungeon World and also Angry GM. I love the Angry GM. Yeah, that just keeping it rolling, keeping it moving in the background, so that so that you know what's happening. I've started for the first time in a long time using a calendar again, a campaign calendar, where I make a little note after each session of what happened and how many days of downtime were in between segments of actual adventuring, so that we have a little more of a record, and we can keep more of a sense of passage of time from when the campaign first started, and when new characters joined the party and other characters died or left, and when they picked up certain assignments, when they met certain important NPCs, when they achieved certain memorable conquests or treasure or items or things like that. So yeah, just keeping it moving. That's great advice. Hope you're doing well over there in the UK. I hope your new venture into being a teacher is still going well. And thanks again for the congratulations. Looking forward to the next 100 episodes. Well, speak his name and he shall appear. Now we've got some Carls. We've got some calls from Karl Rodriguez of the Geomologist Presents podcast. He's going to first talking about some games. Last time I had mentioned that I want to play a game where I can be He-Man. And so he has some suggestions for some types of games that would fit that sword and sorcery / science fantasy vibe that we were talking about before. And also Karl, this week has also reached his 100th episode, so congratulations to him as well. Anyway, here's Karl.
Maybe not a giant green tiger, but a dinosaur, because that would be more with the theme, maybe. Or a saber-toothed cat, a green saber-toothed cat. I think that would work. That'd be pretty cool. With the yellow stripes. A green furred saber-toothed cat or tiger with the yellow stripes. That would work pretty well. I think another game we should try, because if you like that feel of sword and sorcery, a couple games actually, I would say it'd be fun to try with our group, the Modifius Conan 2D20. If Arlen would probably run a great one. I think of that. I've never run it, and I feel like I need to play it more before I could actually run it. That, and then Jason's Barbarians of Lemuria would be hella awesome, because they really bring that vibe. And also when Raven God Games releases their Reavers set, that's going to be pretty cool. It seems very, very European style sword and sorcery, or I don't know if I feel like it's more like Bronze Age or neoclassic type too. That could work. Or that's kind of the feel that I've gotten from it, like Romanesque classic. And I also have this game called Lex Arcana, which is what if Rome had not fallen and had magic? I'd like to give that a whirl. But yeah, I do like Hyperborea. Clearly, one of the players that you were able to play with loves Hyperborea and was asking me to run it again. So yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, those all sound like really fun options. I actually got the Modifius Conan book for Christmas. I just haven't had a chance to really look through it yet and take it in. I've been occupied with other things since I got it, so it's still sitting on the shelf next to my desk waiting for me to crack it open. But any of those games sound like they'd be great for a sword and sorcery kind of a role-playing experience. So maybe we'll get to get one of those to the table or to the virtual table at least at some point in the future. But Karl's got a couple other comments on some other topics.
Yeah, I'm more familiar with the Chris Claremont Uncanny X-Men, which I read and collected. I don't think I have any of those anymore. And then I collected in the late 80s, early 90s, a lot of Ostrander stuff like Grim Jack, which was really cool. And of course, Watchmen and the Batman series stuff at the time, the Frank Miller stuff from Wolverine. But, and then, I think the Todd McFarlane, Amazing Spider-Man 2, but yeah, I honestly don't remember that Joss Whedon did any of that. Maybe I was out of comics by then. Maybe I got tired of it, except for the occasional series that look cool. I mean, even though I worked at a comic store as a grad student, I really didn't get into a lot of comics. I just read them if they looked interesting, and mostly indie, not DC or Marvel. Hey, BJ. Yeah, it's cool that Jason mentioned Dream Park by Larry Niven and Stephen Barnes. I did not know that like Barseem Project and a couple other books by that duo were part of the Dream Park series, which is kind of cool. I'll have to go track those down. Although right now I'm having a hard time finishing Ringworld Throne by Larry Niven because of all the alien sex.
Yeah, I think Chris Claremont is hugely influential on my even on kind of how I tell stories, I notice that when I think of, Claremont had this way, and towards the end, he kind of got away from him. He stopped tying up threads. He'd just leave them dangling and not go back to him. But he had this neat way of having like three things going on at once, so that, a lot of times in his story arcs, you'd have the main thing going on with the X-Men, and then you'd see little snippets of maybe something Magneto was up to. And then they would end the story arc with the X-Men resolved. Each you get a little bit of a cliffhanger in each installment, but then when that story finally resolved, there'd be no cliffhanger. The last page or two would be like this B plot that's been building in the background, and that became the new story arc for the next several issues. And he had a really good way of always having two or three of those things, going back and forth. But then, of course, towards the end of his initial run on X-Men, it got to where there were so many he just abandoned that it kind of got a little frustrating. But yeah, he's an amazing, great imagination and a wonderful writer. And I think defines some of those characters for me. And I always measure the quality of anybody who ever writes X-Men, or whether it's for comics or film, are they true to those classic run where he worked with like John Byrne and John Romita Jr. and Jim Lee and Mark Silvestri and those guys. I think that, I don't know if we'll ever get back to, there was a sort of period from the late 70s up until the early 90s. I say the 80s, but I think it started a little more in the late 70s and carried in there as we're I don't think we're ever going to go back to those comics again. I think that was an era. It's not that the comics today are bad, but I just don't think we're going to get back to that. And of course, for me, that's nostalgia, because that's when I was, first getting into comics and really into it. And it was a major, probably at that point, it was probably a bigger hobby for me than D&D or role-playing games. Comics used to be my main hobby back when I was a teenager. But yeah, and then you if you got out of comics before 2000, you wouldn't have seen Whedon's X-Men again. He only wrote 24 issues there in the early aughts. But hey, we've got a little bit more from Karl about Pathfinder.
Wow, BJ, you are becoming a Pathfinder 2nd edition expert. I guess I'm going to have to try to sell you on the latest Pathfinder Adventure Path, Quest for the Blue Flame. I talked about it in my last podcast as an unboxing, and it does sound pretty cool. It seems very like hex map exploration, which I enjoy that type of gameplay. So yeah, cool stuff. And hold on a second. Sorry, BJ, I thought it was a work call, but in fact it was a solicitation, which is annoying as shit. So I told them I had a work call after they talked for a little bit and not wanting to leave. But yeah, so the adventure path I really would like to run is called Reign of Winter, but it's for Pathfinder 1. And I don't know, would you play Pathfinder 1? I have run into like an issue with some players where they're like, oh, that's the past. I want to move forward and play Pathfinder 2. But conversion doesn't always work. I know I tried to run a Pathfinder 1 adventure using 5e, and it just, it's hard to say. I think player decisions make things harder, and they didn't like the conversion, but it worked.
Sounds like Karl got cut off on that last message. Yeah, I would play Pathfinder 1. I'll play anything if I enjoy the group I'm playing with. I like any game where I can order which versions of games and which games I like better. But that doesn't mean I won't play any of them. I'll only play the ones in the top couple of ranks. I'll play any game if I'm with a good group and we're having a good time. So yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. All right, next up, we've got some calls from Daniel Norton of the Bandits Keep podcast and YouTube channel. So let's hear what Daniel has to say.
EBJ, Daniel from Bandits Keep calling in, kind of responding to Karl, I guess. Yeah, it's interesting, right? It's hard to put labels on things, but people love to do it. And I think the emergent part in the emergent storytelling is that the story can change or should change when the players interact with it, that the story emerges. The story is what the characters do, right? The world is going to be the world no matter what. So the story isn't that the farmer, the farmer's grandchildren got kidnapped. That's not the story. The story is whether or not the player characters interact with that, if they become heroes, if they don't become heroes, if they're now saddened because, like I said, maybe the farmer goes and is killed. Now maybe they become heroes because of their inaction. And that's the story. That's the story of the characters. The world has to be doing stuff, otherwise the characters wouldn't have any story to create. Like, that's the emergent part. It's not that nothing exists until the characters get there. It's that what the characters do with the world is the story. As far as the horror movies and stuff, I think that was a really good conversation. Thoughts from Jason and you. Yeah, it's really interesting. I think that's part of the thing about Westworld, right? Is when does it become a point where it's too much, right? What if those people were clones, right? What if they were, instead of being robots, they're literally, human bodies, but they were cloned, so they maybe aren't a normally birthed person? Are they people? Can you just randomly kill a sentient creature, because it's not born the way that we are or created the way we are? I think that's part of the story of Westworld. And I think that's part of the kind of deeper story there. And that's really interesting. So I enjoy that you guys were discussing that.
BJ, Daniel from Minutes Keep. I just started your recap, but you're talking about these wisp creatures. And I think that's super interesting. The first thing that I thought of when you said it uses confusion was that, players who've been around for a little while, or anybody that knows much about folklore, are never going to go off the path and chase a will-o'-the-wisp as in folklore. So using them can be really difficult, but yeah, it would be interesting if you use some kind of confusion effect, so that if they see the lights, they got to make a save or else walk towards it. They don't really have a choice, right? You could use that kind of thing, or maybe walk around randomly. That might be a good way to activate a will-o'-the-wisp in a game in general. Doesn't sound like that works that way, but that's just what I thought of when you said that. So I'll get back to it. Sounds really cool.
I think those are excellent points all around, Daniel. About the the emergent nature of stories when we're talking about role-playing games, and about that's a good question with regards to Westworld. Yeah, what if it was a clone? That's I think in Westworld the idea is that even though the androids become sentient or basically are people, the guests don't realize that, and the question is, would the human guests continue to behave that way if they knew those were actually people and not just machines that simulate people? Take it a step farther. As a clone now acting, it's a living thing. Yeah, that'd be even more egregious, I think, to continue. Whether you were the owners of Westworld forcing clones to kind of do that. But I guess it happens in Star Wars, right? In the Clone Wars, they have this entire army of people who were just created to be soldiers, and they don't give them a choice. And even the Jedi who treat them fairly well and care about them still don't say, "Hey, man, maybe we should just set all these clones free, and if they want to be in the army, they can, but they need to get choose for themselves." They don't ever do that. It's kind of a weird. You would expect more of people like Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda, Anyway, interesting points, and yeah, that is kind of a cool thing about the wisp. It's kind of preventing people from you disguise it enough or change it enough, just that people don't know what to expect, and the normal strategies don't work, and it still becomes a challenge. So. Another example of making things your own right there. Although Paizo did that, not Karl, but same principle, I guess. Thanks for the call, Daniel. Appreciate it. I think it's fitting that we end this round of call-ins with calls from Jason Connerly of the Nerds RPG Variety Cast. Jason's the biggest cheerleader for all of us on Anchor. He calls into everybody's podcasts and gets the discussion going. He's kind of the hub for all the activity for all of us who are part of this little community. It's fitting not only because of kind of Jason's role in the Anchor podcasting community for role playing games, but also Jason's the first person that ever called into my podcast to welcome me to the community and to encourage me and to let me know that at least one person had listened to what I had to say that first time last February. So here we're gonna end with a couple calls from Jason.
Hey BJ, Jason here. Thank you for recapping the Abomination Vaults, the one from last week in your latest episode. I appreciate that. That got me up to speed. And I look forward to playing with you guys this week. Take care.
Hey BJ, Jason here. Enjoyed your latest Collin episode. I definitely do not think having a living world makes it a story game. We can argue what defines a story game. I would argue that the idea of meta mechanics and meta currency goes a long way towards a story game. The idea of the players that have PCs as opposed to the game master be able to find world elements as the story goes during the game, naming taverns or adding story bits as they go. That could be argued as a story game, but I definitely don't think a living world is it. And honestly, I don't know that those definitions really matter. Are you and your players enjoying the game? Great. Then you're having fun. And that ultimately is all that matters.
I couldn't have said it better myself. If you're having fun, that's all that matters. Thanks, Jason, for the calls. Thanks for the support over the past year, and looking forward to more conversations and more games that we get to play together. And really appreciate you, man. Take care. And that's it for the 1 year anniversary 100th episode of The Arcane Alienist. I want to thank everybody who has listened over the past year, everybody who's called in. I want to thank my players that play with me in my home games that I run, and the guys who play with me in the online games that I play in, where I'm just a player. Some of whom you heard from here, Jason and Karl. So I'm looking forward for 100 more episodes in the coming 12 months. I don't know if I'll get out 100 by next February, but we'll see what happens. Also, want to make a shout out once again. Karl got his 100th episode this week, and also Rob, also known as Mignon, who hosts the Confessions of a Wee Timorous Bushi podcast, hit 100 episodes in the last week or so. So the three of us hit the century mark right together. So be sure and check out his podcast and also the podcasts of all the other callers that called in today. Thanks again. And once again, thank you guys for listening, and I'll be back later. And that's it for this episode of The Arcane Alienist. I want to thank Dave Bone for the cover art that I use for the episodes. Check out ironseer.com. And the music is Come and Get It by Scott Holmes Music. Thank you for listening. Give me a call sometime through the Anchor app or at the Anchor website, and I'll be back in the future with another episode.